Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Yes, it is. What is up, my friends? Welcome into it. It is your Friday, the greatest day of the entire week. I know you've been waiting all week long for this moment. Now you're here. Pat yourself on the back. You scream, I scream. We all scream for ice cream. Although it is not National Ice Cream Day, that would be the day that Donald Trump officially won. Well, almost. We could write that in. Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race. Kamala Harris tries to step in, and it's a beatdown from there. So I think that's a win. I would take that one. Great to have you today on a Friday. We got a lot to talk about going on right now, and we will go to it live if it does happen while we're on the program. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin in their current meeting right now talking about a ceasefire between Russia and the Ukraine. They have a podium set up for a press conference after the meeting. We'll see exactly what that looks like. If they go live to that press conference in the next half hour or so before our guest, then we will go live to that press conference and get the latest on how that meeting actually went. I got to admit, I love the fact that Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska, which according to some Democrats are like, Vladimir Putin and the Russians think that they own that place. No, we bought it from them legitimately, and he can try and take it back. Good luck with that. But we just kind of rubbed it in his face. Just a little bit of a dig in there, just a little poking of the bear saying, hey, let's meet in Alaska that we took from you or bought it from you. And then as they met, if you've seen the video on there, it's really hilarious. They meet. They shake hands, they're walking down the red carpet, they're in the tarmac, and all of a sudden a B-2 stealth fighter and the flyover happens, showing Vladimir Putin, welcome to America, buddy. I think that was like the most patriotic thing that can happen. That was awesome. That being said, we'll see, again, if they do have the press conference live on the program, then we will have that here in just a little bit. Bottom of the hour, we have Dr. Tyler Evans on the show. He is the author of the latest book, Pandemics, Poverty, and Politics. Really excited to chat with him. We actually might spar a little bit because he's a bit on the other side of the aisle talking about pandemics, poverty, and politics and the misinformation in the healthcare industry, the collapsing of the healthcare industry because of the lack of trust in the healthcare industry. What does that look like? So looking forward to chatting with him in just a bit. But obviously the big story of the day today.
What's trending today?
Is this meeting with Vladimir Putin. Could we see a ceasefire in Russia and Ukraine? I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't know why we have to be the sole responsible ones to actually make a ceasefire. It is in the middle. It is over there in the East, the Middle East, that whole area. It's their responsibility. It is Europe's responsibility. You guys need to take care of this issue. The fact that we have to, I get that we have some interest in it, and I get that, we're a very big influence in that area. Totally understand. At the same time, why is it solely our responsibility to make this happen? Donald Trump has been working nonstop around the clock on multiple different fronts, creating peace deals and peace agreements and ceasefires around the world, including, by the way, in the Middle East with Israel and Iran. We just saw the one last week with a new peace deal in a friendship agreement that was made between two different countries. We see India and a few others. I mean, Donald Trump has been doing more for the world on world peace than any other president or world leader. And I'd say that's something that we should be very proud of. Now, this one's on the slate. Can we make it happen? Donald Trump said during the campaign, if you remember last year, he said that if he were going to get the nomination, he would have this done before he even takes office. He would be able to stop the killing. And when asked, do you support Russia? Do you support Ukraine? Which one do you support? He said, I want the dying to stop. Can we stop killing each other, please? Then we can figure it out from there. That's what this conversation's about. And I have a theory that we'll get to in just a moment on whether this is actually going to be productive or not, whether it's going to move forward or not with an actual ceasefire, and whether Vladimir Putin can actually be trusted. But if anybody was at the helm for this negotiation, I would put Donald Trump at the top of that list. This was with Brett Baer from Fox News on Air Force One to Alaska earlier today when Donald Trump said this.
Is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
So when you talk about deals, it's all I do. My whole life I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want it because you have to weave and bob, and you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning. This is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. Or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
Yeah, so that was on the way up to Alaska, and it would be a major feat. Now, here's been the conversation that we know of so far. The whole idea has been we're going to meet with Vladimir Putin. Maybe we can get a temporary ceasefire. Let's figure it out. Let's stop killing people, which is very difficult, apparently, for Vladimir Putin to do. Let's stop killing citizens. Let's stop bombing apartment complexes. Let's just stop and then figure it out from here. The current, at least preliminary negotiation that we had heard from the White House and from Washington, D.C., from the mainstream media, was that we were going to say, hey, let's stop the ceasefire. Let's allow Russia to keep that eastern couple regions of Ukraine for now, and then we can try to negotiate them back diplomatically to put them back into the hands of Ukraine thereafter. Now, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, has not been happy with that deal. He's really upset he's not in negotiation meetings today, and he's openly said that he has no intention of actually giving up any land whatsoever. Even after this week, we just heard the news that Vladimir Putin in Russia has now sent an additional 150,000 soldiers to Ukraine, and they've started to make some really big gains in taking over a lot of that land on that eastern section. Seems like that Ukraine kind of in a desperate state. And as a leader, you would think, hey, I want my people to stop dying, and then let's diplomatically try to win some of this back over, because we are a smaller nation, even though we're bigger, maybe land-wise, we have some decent land. We are a smaller nation. We're a smaller military. We cannot win this war without the help of everybody else. And if everybody else is encouraging us to do a temporary ceasefire, give this up temporarily, maybe that's what we have to do. But this guy, I'm telling you, this Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he is way too big for his britches, in my humble opinion, that he thinks that he has way too much leverage when he has zero leverage, and that we, not him, but we hold all the cards. And he knows that, which is why Donald Trump kicked him out of the White House just a couple months ago, because he couldn't deal with the arrogance of what this guy has. So he's angry he's not at the meeting, but it makes sense, right? If you have someone that's unhinged and that is kind of a fireball and a wild card, I don't want him in negotiations right now either. We're trying to stop people from dying, for crying out loud. Let's wait until we come up with a deal. Then we'll go to Zelenskyy and Ukraine and say, hey, this is the offer that's on the table. You kind of need to accept this, and then we'll move forward from there. Will it happen? Don't really know. According to the former ambassador of NATO for the United States, Kurt Volker, he was on the media today as well, giving his anticipation of what this may look like moving forward.
Putin will not give an inch in reality. He may try to do a little smoke and mirrors. He may say, well, we could do a ceasefire, but certain conditions have to be met, and then get Trump and the U.S. to then start saying, oh, what are those conditions, and what do we have to do? Where do we go? So Putin tries to steer the conversation away from the obvious point of stopping the war, which is what Trump has been pushing all along.
Yeah, so not very optimistic from most members of the media. And here's where my theory comes into play. And I really think that there are some things going on behind the scenes that Donald Trump may or may not be aware of, coming from our own side of the aisle, at least from the United States, from the Democrat side of the aisle, that is doing whatever they can to make sure the conflict continues on, that Donald Trump does not get the ceasefire, and that they have whatever interest that's going on either in Ukraine and or in Russia right now that's making them continue this. And that's where we go.
What's trending today?
With this, and I think this is also an Andy prediction here for the program.
Andy's prediction.
All right, you heard the news today that a former First Lady and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton had made the case that if Donald Trump was able to make the peace deal that was on the table to actually give Ukraine everything back, to create a ceasefire, to actually end the killing, that she would nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Sounds kind of weird, right? Sounds a little strange. But I have theory. Actually, I have two theories on this. Number one, I find it really ironic that Hillary Clinton would make a comment like that at the same time that we're starting to now see the information about the Russian hoax and the dossier that she had created and fabricated, the dossier that Barack Obama, the DNC, and the Clinton Foundation all together colluded with to hand over to the FBI, whom, by the way, knew was a fake dossier that led to the impeachment twice of Donald Trump because he was colluding with Russia in the election of 2016. We know that information's out now. And she's going to look really, really bad as they continue to be turned over to the grand jury and they continue to investigate that situation. So if that offer of nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize, if that is legitimate, then that's a very large amount of butt kissing from Hillary Clinton saying, oh, yeah, if you create this ceasefire and peace deal, I will nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize because I really don't want to be behind bars from some of the shenanigans that we did to you in 2016. You know how much she detests him. She really hates him, like to the nth degree. The unstable, unhinged, completely emotionally crazy lady that is Hillary Clinton. We know she's unhinged. That being said, that's one theory that I have. The second theory is that there's something deeper going on here. And if you listen to her tone when she made the comment about nominating Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, it almost gives you a sense that she's involved with something.
And that over a period of time, maybe this is the opportunity to make it clear that there must be a ceasefire. There will be no exchange of territory. And that over a period of time, Putin should be actually withdrawing from the territory he seized in order to demonstrate his good faith efforts, let us say, not to threaten European security. You know, look, if we could pull that off, if President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, so obviously a hint of sarcasm in there, right? And now, look, if he's able to actually give up all the land, if Ukraine gets everything back that they wanted, if he's able to create this ceasefire, have Russia withdraw from all of the land that they've been able to take over, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously a hint of sarcasm there, right? We can sense it. We're pretty sarcastic here on this program ourselves, so we know sarcasm because we're the ones that do it ourselves. Ha-ha! But nonetheless, why is she so certain that that's not going to happen? Number one, we know that Vladimir Putin really has his own agenda. He don't really care, and these negotiations may not go anywhere. We don't know. They're still setting up for the press conference afterwards, so it doesn't sound like it's going to happen here anytime soon. But that being said, we know Vladimir Putin is a bit unhinged. He has his own agenda, and he just really don't care what anybody else says. We also know Volodymyr Zelenskyy is also a bit unhinged because he's the purist that says, I'm going to get everything that I want or else I'll keep the war going and play the victim. I don't have enough resources to keep the war going, even though I chose to do that because I want everything. We're dealing with two toddlers and two children here. But is there something more malicious going on? We know that the Biden family had ties with Russia and with China and with Ukraine. We know that Joe Biden was the one that bullied individuals, elected officials in Ukraine to back off on certain investigations that was leading to family affairs with Burisma and other issues. We know that the Clintons are very powerful. They may not be in power right now, but they are a very powerful entity in politics, and they were very heavily involved with Russia before. We know that Obama was very close to Vladimir Putin. If you remember the whispered off-microphone recording of like, hey, once I get elected the second term, I'll have more flexibility. We can work a little bit more together. You remember all of that. There's something going on here, and it almost seems like they don't want the conflict to end because obviously if it did, Donald Trump would look really, really good. But there's got to be some personal interest going on behind the scenes that are encouraging them to keep this conflict going while Donald Trump's trying to do everything he can to have these negotiations, sincere talks, and actually make the killing stop. Something's not adding up here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. When reason meets radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Here's what I learned, Sean, when I ran the Russiagate investigation. As bad as the crime is, the corruption cover-up from senior government officials who are sworn to uphold their duties and accountability for the American public, they are the ones that violated that trust the most internally and need to be held accountable. So the people you've listed and the names you're calling out aren't surprises. Their names are on those documents. Those documents are public. The FISA's public. The 302s are public. The Strzok page texts are public. Documents are being released weekly by Johnny Ratcliffe and Tulsi, making it public. The burn bag information is coming out. The Durham Annex is coming out. The classified appendix is coming out. The American people are going to see and hear the names themselves, and they can touch and feel it. As far as what my investigators are going to do, these guys are the best in the business, and we've assembled a team of accountability, and we're going to deliver for the American people like never before.
All right, so that's Kash Patel during the latest interview talking about, hey, all this information's coming out. Not only did we break the law, and we had some really bad crime breakers out there by doing the crime itself, but actually just the cover-up itself is just as bad. With all of these burn bags, all these documents that are in burn bags that they were going to destroy, not allowing us to see what's going on, which would explain why we haven't gotten a lot of information on the Epstein files. Who knows what they've destroyed on some of those, and so many other conspiracies. So with the theory I have right now, with Hillary Clinton being sarcastic, oh yeah, Donald Trump's able to remove Russia, have them pull back, give them all the land back to Ukraine, do this, do that. Oh, sure, I'll nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize. That sounds good, right?
Putin should be actually withdrawing from the territory he seized in order to demonstrate his good faith efforts, let us say, not to threaten European security.
Yes.
You know, look, if we could pull that off, if President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Sure, yeah. She doesn't really believe that's going to happen. Why is she so certain that it's not going to happen? Sure, we get it. Vladimir Putin's a wild card. Sure, we know it. Volodymyr Zelensky's a child, and he wants everything, and he's not going to give up unless he gets absolutely everything. Then he'll finally step back and allow some type of ceasefire. So is it unlikely? Sure. It is unlikely. At the same time, we have a political side of the aisle that has been very ingrained with their own personal interests in these nations for a very long time, and it almost seems like they want to keep this conflict going for their own personal gains, but also to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't actually get any type of success by creating the peace that he's working really hard to do. And if you don't believe it, Andy, I can't believe you would say that there would be interest against the American agenda and that we would want conflict going on in the world. Yeah, that's not a very good stance to be taking, because we know how politics works, right? In fact, we've already seen it under the 6 months of the Trump administration. If you remember, during the announcement of the the trade deals and the tariff negotiations with other nations, we've openly had Democrats in courts try to stop the ability of Donald Trump from doing these negotiations while in the middle of the negotiation. And if you've ever been in a sales deal, if you've ever been in a negotiation yourself trying to find a happy middle ground, the other side doesn't feel very encouraged to need to give up anything when you have the other side that's eating itself alive saying, no, we're not even allowed to do this in the first place. That would make sense, right? So why would they continue that? Plus, we have a military-industrial complex, by the way, that, as you know, has not had a whole lot of action lately. Donald Trump stopping these conflicts around the world left and right. The military-industrial complex that really wants some more conflict to happen, that really is missing out on a buttload of money right now with the lack of wars happening. They want this to continue to go. And, of course, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who, again, refuses to give up anything and then says, I'm a victim, I don't have enough money and guns. And then we give them more money and guns. Where do you think that's coming from? Oh, yeah, it's coming from the United States. I'm just telling you, there are a lot of forces right now behind the scenes that while Donald Trump is laying this out, literally bringing a communist like Vladimir Putin and the nation of Russia into American soil in Alaska, kind of taunting him a little bit by the state that they gave us and we bought from them, having our flyover, making this big presence and really trying to talk about peace. There seems to be a lot of forces behind the scenes that are trying to prevent that from happening, giving them other incentives to keep this conflict going, and it's pretty pathetic. And that's the deep state we're trying to fight right now. Lots more coming up. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Welcome back into the program. Great to have you along for the ride as usual. As you know, we focus a lot on the Make America Healthy Again movement, the transition that we're seeing in the healthcare industry, and looking at the 2020 hindsight of what we've gone through the past few years, and especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's where we go to with our next guest here on the program.
Let's go to the Hoosier Media Hotline.
Are we politicizing healthcare too much, and what does the future of healthcare actually look like in this nation? Really happy to have on the program. He is the author of the book Pandemics, Poverty, and Politics, Decoding the Social and Political Drivers of Pandemics from Plague to COVID-19. Really happy to have on the program Dr. Tyler Evans. Tyler, how are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you joining on the show. It's a fascinating conversation, and healthcare, in a good fashion and I think in a bad way, have been focused on as a mainstream talking point now on the political front, on the cultural front. We're seeing a transition, I think, in the healthcare industry overall. Before we get into details, do you think it's been helping or hurting the overall idea of science, the idea of medicine, and the idea of healthcare in general for the country?
It's fundamentally destroying the sort of the bedrock of science, which is essentially the sort of the main generator of public health. Interesting.
How so? What's been changing that you've been seeing?
This sort of this pattern, has been sort of baking for decades, there's definitely a social component to it, but a lot of this has been accelerated as a result of sort of the politicization of both science and public health, and they're really sort of inextricably sort of linked. We've certainly seen a sort of, an increasing distrust of science when it comes to, environmental conditions, which are strongly correlated with sort of the emergence of public health, threats like communicable diseases. Increasingly, who knew that we would see public health as being sort of one of the most divisive elements in this country. We've seen historically 3 to 4 different elements that have been incredibly divisive, religion and abortion, guns. But who knew that face masks and vaccinations would be so polarizing? The reality is public health is a common good. It's out there to protect populations. It has existed. It's existed for centuries. We have advanced. We have significantly, reduced morbidity and mortality throughout the world as a result of public health measures, sanitation, hygiene, antibiotics, vaccinations, things that a lot of folks don't even know about. And public health is often that sort of silent sort of entity out there that is, again, just sort of protecting populations in a way that they don't need to understand on a sort of daily basis. Yeah. And so the more that we question that, the more that we question the principles that sort of lead to those outcomes, the more that we are hurting all Americans, and it's really it's deeply disturbing, and we're really worried about it.
Yeah, there's been a mass, I guess, quote unquote, change or awakening or whatever you want to call it since the COVID pandemic, where a lot of people began questioning a lot of things in the healthcare industry overall. Now that we're years down the road and we've kind of looked at stuff 2020 hindsight, and we've seen how we address the issue, and maybe we could do stuff a little bit better if this ever, God forbid, ever happens again. Now at this point, do you think that trust in the medical industry, trust in the healthcare industry overall, is it coming back, or are we still dealing with some issues?
No, it's getting worse, unfortunately. There was a Pew study about 5 years ago that had identified the most trusted professions out there, and teachers were number 1, nurses were number 2, doctors were number 4.
Wow.
That has changed. I think scientists were like number 17. That has changed fundamentally. If we revisited that, I would imagine that nurses may have not changed too much, but doctors certainly would have been sort of further downgraded on that poll. And unfortunately, it is because of the way that social media has essentially become sort of an echo chamber for a lot of folks. So a lot of folks are getting this information through social media channels that are not vetted by professionals, that are not vetted by folks that have the training and the certifications to understand it. Most docs have trained for at least a decade. I trained for 17 years. It's not ChatGPT or kind of looking up on your Facebook feed is not going to give you the answers that you need. You really need to sort of vet that, and then when you take the current administration and sort of the questioning of decades of really sort of core science, when you're dismissing the panel of experts on immunizations. And essentially some of the most sort of trusted and venerated scientists in the country, possibly in the world. When you do that, you are sending a message to the rest of the country that science doesn't matter and public health doesn't matter. When you openly question vaccinations, and then that seemingly leads to outbreaks of measles, which is one of our sort of oldest and most dangerous infectious diseases out there. When you do that, again, you are allowing these echo chambers to get further sort of to get stronger and allow them to, again, kind of question things that will hurt them. When it comes to, for example, I often use the analogy of fires, right? If there's a fire taking place, I'm not going to question, what the firefighters that are doing, and particularly in the sort of the emergent setting. I'm going to let them do their job. I might ask some questions afterwards, but we need to really just allow the scientists and the public health professionals to do their job, and let's listen to them. But let's listen to messengers, to trusted messengers that could connect to communities in a meaningful way.
Yeah, we got to bring the trust back to the health industries overall, because no one, I don't think, is really anti-vax when there are vaccines, like you mentioned, that actually do a lot of good. But I want to go back to where I think the politicizing of the healthcare industry really started, which I think was the actual governmental industries and institutions themselves. When Dr. Fauci was telling us that we have to get a vaccine or else we'll spread it and kill everybody else. And if we get it, then we're protected. But if we don't get it, then we're going to spread it to the people that may have gotten the vaccine that are protected, but yet they're still going to be susceptible because we didn't get it. And it was this whole thing. And then we saw a lot of changes with the different policies. And it seemed like we were running around, and we started to not trust the industries and institutions themselves because they were spreading a lot of the stuff that we started questioning that didn't make a whole lot of sense to us. And I think that really did start a lot of the questioning on what they were actually saying and whether it was actually legitimate or not.
Yeah, great question. I think it was definitely multifactorial. It was the distrust in science. We've seen this emergence. I think for decades, and it's really increased significantly over the last 10 years or so, particularly in the public health space, particularly accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
I think between the different federal agencies, the first Trump administration questioning Fauci's sort of legitimacy and that sort of ongoing feud, I think led to a lot of sort of distrust. Yes, people would often, like you just did, people would often cite Fauci's essentially he was the ambassador, the spokesman for science in the United States. And,
he said he was science, which was kind of fun. He was science.
Right. And so it's funny because my boy just started playing with this science experience, and he keeps on referring to science as a sort of like both a noun and a verb. He's like, I want to do the science. The reality is science is always open for change.
Right.
And that's what people like to latch onto when they identify the sort of the possible erroneous nature of some of the sort of conclusions, right? And we accept that, right? Like we accept that with science, that it is open to ongoing experimentation and ongoing sort of discoveries. And that's one of the sort of the beauties of science. And so when something is identified, if we're able to, say X is sort of correlated with Y, it doesn't mean that's going to be a static sort of finding. That means that at that time X is correlated with Y, but X could ultimately, be correlated with, B or D down the line, right? And so we need to do our best to communicate that to the public at that given time. The reality is vaccinations, categorically have been one of the most effective ways to protect populations. The problem in countries like the U.S. is that you have to pay to play. And we are so well protected. We have such a strong system of public health, or we did, that, so many people are protected from these abstract, sort of diseases like polio or measles or, other elements, influenza, where they don't actually feel that they're at risk. But the reality is, when I've worked in the global south, I've worked in low and middle income countries. I've seen people die as a result of measles. I've seen them die as a result of cholera. I've seen them die as a result of Ebola. And that's because the folks around them were not sort of protected, right? So we have to create these concentric circles of immunity, and that takes decades to sort of, to build out. So getting back to the question, if I don't get that vaccination, does that mean necessarily I'm going to die or I'm going to get sick? You might, right? But ultimately what it means is that you are ultimately protecting your community, right? You're protecting either you, and it's all, again, these concentric circles. That could be, that could be your family, that could be your church group, that could be your neighborhood, that could be your city or your county. But if everybody sort of refuses to play, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that goes into the conversation about herd immunity, both either natural immunity or vaccinated immunity, which I remember having those conversations during that time as well. Tyler, hang on the line. Got to take a break. Right around the corner, we'll continue this and talk about the future of healthcare when we come back right here for The Voice of Reason.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. America's safe space for common sense. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Welcome back to it. We got one segment left as we wrap things up for this hour on a Friday here for The Voice of Reason. Great to have you. We are hanging out with Dr. Tyler Evans. Interesting conversation as he is the author of the latest book, Pandemics, Poverty, and Politics, Decoding the Social and Political Drivers of Pandemics from Plague to COVID-19. Doctor, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the future of healthcare. My wife, as many of my listeners know, is a master herbalist. She talks about holistic remedies, alternative medicines, getting away from big pharmaceutical industries, and not getting rid of them completely and choosing one or the other, but finding ways to integrate them together to be the healthiest person possible. And that's what I want to ask you moving forward is with the future that we're seeing, the changes that we're seeing in government right now, the MAHA movement, Dr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the Trump administration, are we seeing the potential of an integration between the two industries with vaccinations and modern science and with the holistic remedies, the herbs, the teas, the plants, the stuff that we've used for thousands of years? Do you think that they can be integrated together and actually make us a healthier nation and a healthier people?
Well, that's a complicated question. Let me kind of respond to it in different buckets. Number one, I personally strongly believe in the sort of the potential efficacy of natural herbal remedies, and so looking at this from a sort of holistic standpoint, I strongly advocate for complementary alternative medicine. I don't think it is a replacement for Western biomedicine. I do think that it can certainly complement the current sort of biomedical apparatus, and I think it's important. I mean, when we look at our pharmacological discoveries, over the course of decades or centuries, of course, even obviously famously drawing back to like the penicillin mold, we identify a lot of these discoveries as a result of kind of herbs and whatnot. Yeah. That's number one. Number two, the reality is I think complementary alternative medicine could really work. The reason why it hasn't is because of money, and because pharmaceutical industries basically won't allow a lot of that to have their clinical trials, so that they can essentially provide the evidence. And that is that's the only place where I get slightly skeptical, is because I'm an evidence-based doc, right? I think hopefully most docs are. And so if I can't see the evidence for it, if I can't see the science that backs up this potential sort of treatment, it's very hard for me to, advocate for it. I could philosophically, sort of talk through it, but that's not science, and I wouldn't be a good doc if I did that.
Do we have science for it? I mean, have they even done tests on it to see whether it's actually effective or not?
Well, that's what I'm saying. That clinical trials cost money, and so they haven't had the opportunity to really kind of have those trials because they haven't had the money. And I believe the pharmaceutical industry has really kind of tried to suppress any sort of clinical trials. Now, increasingly, the national institutes do have a complementary alternative medicine section now, and now in the sort of current sort of disruptive climate we're in. Who knows where that's going to go? But there is increasingly were opportunities for research to evolve in that space. So I think the more that we could kind of advocate for that, and I think particularly when you get into certain areas of CAM like acupuncture, yoga, there's a lot more evidence for that for sure, and it's been sort of incorporated and introduced into kind of official U.S. healthcare systems. I run some programs where folks are in jail or getting out of jail and using complementary alternative medicine. It's actually very helpful from a behavioral health standpoint, and we've been studying it.
Sure.
So I think that the more that we get that evidence, the more that we get that trials, I think increasingly, more scientists and docs will kind of will advocate for it. And I think a lot of communities have been chomping at the bit to allow that. So I'm kind of waiting for that sort of convergence, and I have confidence that it will happen.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We're at a crossroads right now. It's a very interesting time to watch where the healthcare industry is going to go from here on out, and I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. It is Dr. Tyler Evans. Go check him out. Pandemics, Poverty, and Politics is his book. You can find it on Amazon, other places as well. Great conversation, my friend. I appreciate it very much. Got to do it again real soon.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, I love it. Great conversation. It's Dr. Tyler Evans. Go and make sure and check him out. Check out his latest book on Amazon, Pandemics, Poverty, and Politics, Decoding the Social and Political Drivers of Pandemics from Plague to COVID-19. It's an interesting conversation integrating the modern science today and the, natural science from what we've seen before and what's effective, what's not effective. What's interesting to me that I took away from that was that Big Pharma doesn't want, or it's really expensive to do the trials to see whether actually natural medicine actually works. The crazy part is that, as we know, most vaccines and most medicine that we have today from pharmaceutical companies are derived from the natural plants. I mean, that's where they come. It's just like a synthetic version of that. So I don't know why they wouldn't work, but of course they don't want to sink money into those trials to see whether they work or not, because they would lose a whole lot of money because they can't patent natural plants in nature. That does it for us today. Back at it again here real soon for Monday next week. Until then, be your own voice of reason. I'm Andy Hoosier. We'll see you on the radio. Bye.